I sat in my dojo, honing my upside-down bat style, when I received a letter. The King of Kung Fu and Friendship Tournament? Ha! A true master need not show off in competition, I said. I threw that letter in the trash and I went back to my brazen monkey style. But then, a phone call came. My long-lost evil father was hosting the tournament. The only way to face him was to battle through and win the whole thing. I heard the call and I must answer. I have been visited by the Herald Archetype. So, yeah, let's talk about that. I'm author DC Ferguson, and this is the Worldbuilding Dojo. Now, before we get started, I want to give you all a quick reminder. Subscribers to my newsletter are getting a copy of Cora Blake, Arcane Agent, for free. This short story is a prequel to the Dragon's Dream saga, and a great chance to get started with the series. I linked the newsletter sign up in the comments. Make sure to sign up and get your free copy. Heralds exist as a call to action, bringing our heroes the adventure on a silver platter. If it were only that simple, though, right? If you've been following our series on character archetypes, you know that these archetypes take different forms and have much deeper meaning and significance in our hero's journey. Not only is the Herald no exception, but here we see some of the most obvious deep dives into the psychology presented by Carl Jung. Symbolism, and even the use of the Herald, is so malleable that the Herald's often found in stories that are not even a hero's journey. We're going to do a deep cut on that later, don't you worry. So, let's talk about the basic surface stuff first. The Herald is going to be the message, and the message is that it's time for change. So when the Herald appears, usually and hopefully in the first act, the message is, hey, this stuff is happening. If only our main character would do something about that. The purpose may not seem all that grandiose, but its symbolic meaning can be much deeper. Again, we're getting to that. But sometimes, when the Herald shows up and delivers the message, they're gone from the story with no lasting effects. On the other side, if we wanted to keep them around, the Herald is an awesome dual classer. You'll find your friendly R2 unit to be both a Herald and an ally. You'll find Morpheus to be a great mentor and Herald. There are even examples of the Herald being the Shadow themselves, or their guardian sent to bring the hero into the fray for their own nefarious reasons. There is so much versatility here, it's insane. So, now we know the purpose of the Herald and their wide reach, their versatility, and their many faces. Let's take a look at what it all means. When we mine the oral storytelling of our ancestors, as we've said, we're telling these legends of both threats within and threats without. The Shadow is out there, stalking our tribe like a panther. The Shadow is within us, a beast that makes us a danger to those we love. So, the Herald strolls in and identifies the danger, but what are they really doing? Well, they're saying it's time for change. What does that look like to us as individuals? Well, it's often called epiphany, and we hear about it all the time, from the come to God moment among religious people to the I hit rock bottom stories of addiction recovery stories. Epiphany is the moment that the stars align in a person's mind. The Herald says, hey, this isn't right, and then the hero hears this message and says, I can do something about that. Now, if only it were that simple. What we say when we retell the legend of a person we know that battled addiction is that they won. The part that we leave out is how many rock bottoms did it take. And so we see that expressed in the hero's tale. Often, the hero rejects the call initially, like Luke Skywalker. All he wants to do is get off of Tatooine, but when Obi-Wan says, let's go get Leia, he balks and goes back to his aunt and uncle. It's only when he gets there and finds them dead that he's out of reasons to refuse the call. The evil monster that lives inside the volcano. The tribe has been feeding its sacrifices for decades now. The Herald says, no more, and then we tell the legend of the hero that bested it. We don't really talk about the 3 very brave people before him that heard the call, went up there, and never came back. So, you see the great messaging and symbolism here. The Herald is more than just a Dear Hero letter. The Herald brings the greater message that we need change. Sometimes that will come with a list of instructions. Sometimes it will be vague. What it does, though, is it sets our hero on a path of change. Now that we understand that, let's see what happens when that path goes right off a mountain. Now this is where we get to have a little bit of fun. We're talking about hero journeys and character archetypes, but the two are not mutually exclusive. Oh no. Sometimes archetypes just want to do their own thing and go off and do whatever they want with any genre that they meet in a bar at last call. So, we see archetypes pop up elsewhere in literature, and when it gets dark, oh boy do we get to play. Stephen King gives us a wonderful, almost cookie-cutter example of a dark herald in Pet Sematary. The character of Judd, when you look at him critically, could be argued as an ally or even a thin case for a mentor, but I disagree on both sentiments. Instead, Judd's greatest purpose in Pet Sematary is that he is the herald of the darkness that the Pet Sematary brings. He warns Lewis to respect the shadow that's there. It can't be beaten. Don't try. Leave it be and pray it doesn't enter your life. But Lewis doesn't listen. Perhaps to prove him wrong, perhaps in part to witness the miracle, Lewis takes the deceased family cat, buries it in the Pet Sematary. See, here, Lewis was tempted by the herald's warnings instead of fearing them, as he was supposed to do. This is a morality play through and through. At every turn in the story, Lewis makes the exact wrong decision, giving in to the temptation of the dark power, hoping he can harness it and make the power his own. But he's weak, you see. After the cat returned to life, and there was darkness in it, he saw it. He's face to face with the power of the shadow filling up this cat, and what does he do next? Unwilling to accept the loss of his son Gage, again he goes to the Pet Sematary, and what comes back isn't his son. It kills his wife. But what does he say? He says, I'll do it right away, maybe this time. He finds excuses, he justifies it in his mind. If the herald never told him about the place, would any of this have happened? No, of course not. The herald brought the message that it was time for change, and the change was a dark path that would bring Lewis's undoing. But more than that, it's an undoing by his own hand. His curiosity, his pain, his loss, his inability to accept things the way they are. That sometimes loved ones die, and there's nothing that can or should be done about that. Lewis is trying to conquer this negativity by inviting the shadow. And well, geez, you get what you pay for. Now, as phenomenal an example as the book and 2 movies based off of it can be, we do have another great example, and it's our deep cut for this week. We're looking at not a film, but an older video game, the 2001 survival horror game Silent Hill 2. So, we'll be digging into this part a little bit later, but the herald in this story isn't a person at all. It's a letter. So, James Sunderland lost his wife to an illness 3 years ago. He gets a letter from her, telling him that she's waiting for him in Silent Hill. Drawn to this resort town to get to the bottom of the letter, James finds himself in a ghost town filled with horrible monsters and a dense fog. Now, the letter from a dead wife is huge here. It's enough that I'd say makes for compelling motivation for virtually any hero. A grieving husband, still unable to get his life back together after his wife was taken from him by a long, protracted illness. And here comes a letter that says, I'm waiting in Silent Hill. You promised you'd take me back there again someday, but you never did. Yeah, good enough for me. I'm in. The cruelest turn of all, and what I think is a bombshell of storytelling genius, comes from the ending. James comes face to face with the truth. Silent Hill is a purgatory, a special hell that he wanted for himself. With his wife dying of her illness over a long period of time, James succumbed to his own desperation and smothered her with a pillow. Blocking the truth from his mind, he believed she died of her disease, incapable of recalling or accepting his part in her death. The letter was a dark herald to bring him to Silent Hill, a place that seems to create its own special brand of hell for every person that visits. He went there to suffer, because a part of his mind couldn't forget what he did, couldn't live with his guilt, and wanted to be punished for it. The amount of psychology and symbolism that goes into this turn in the story actually puts it into my top 10 for greatest storytelling in a video game, period. I still get goosebumps talking about this plot because of its brilliance. If you're a fan of horror, I'd be amazed if this never hit your radar, but go back and play this if you missed it. The story alone is worth it. So, as we can see, the Dark Herald can signify a change. That doesn't mean it's a good one. In a hero's journey, sure, let's go slay a dragon. But in horror, we often use the Dark Herald to usher in the shadow, conquering our hero instead of the other way around. This creates a morality play that isn't the legend of when light wins the day, but what happens to the weak when they feed the shadow. Who knew the Herald could be such a big deal, huh? So we're at that wonderful point in every part of this series where we ask, "Hey DC, can I have that rock over there fill in for this archetype?" And guy who talks to your monitor, the answer is this week again a resounding yes. As a matter of fact, you might laugh, but we can take that literally. Remember, the Herald is the message, a harbinger for change in the hero's world. The hero need only receive that message for the Herald to have done their job. So sometimes the Herald can simply come in the form of a letter, as we just discussed. Sometimes the letter can be in the form of a hologram. And sometimes the Herald can simply come in the form of giant rocks in space heading for Earth, as we see in Armageddon. Now, what's funny about this is that we can announce the danger when it's done as an object, but very rarely will it say anything of the solution. I could honestly see some kind of twisty-turny plot where the Herald is a letter, and the hero goes in pursuit of the quest, only to find that it wasn't the problem they thought they were solving, or it was written by the shapeshifter or the shadow, and the hero was in service to them. I can't immediately think of too many examples off the top of my head, but I think that also says that it's fertile ground for storytelling in there somewhere. Now, let's do a thought exercise using some of the things that we've learned today and in our past episodes. And for that, let's look at Back to the Future in all of its glory. When we try to look for the Herald, we know we need to look at the first act. So it'll be nothing after this scene. We also know that this scene is a catalyst, the inciting event that starts the journey. So our Herald has to be somewhere after it. That's good. It gives us a narrow window. Now, this is where the Herald gets a bit ubiquitous. We have the flyer here. We have Doc Brown himself. And we have Marty crashing into the barn. We can make a case for every one of these, but the truth is they're all correct. Yes, 3 heralds, each with their own piece of the puzzle. You see, we have to know that we're in 1955 and have to get back home. That's the danger. Doc tells us the science of the how to get back, and the danger of altering the past. The flyer gives us the means to get back. With the combination of these 3 things, the hero and the ally figure out the danger, the quest, and the means to solve it. This formula is not isolated to Back to the Future either. Mysteries use this all the time, but for a more recent example in pop culture, Stranger Things has literally used this format in all 3 seasons. Between the kids, the adults, and some outsider character, they each get a piece of the puzzle that doesn't make sense until all 3 groups converge and share what they know, usually around episode 10. I'm not kidding. I love this series, but they've been using this formula every single season. In this regard, you can say there is no herald at all. The other side of that coin says there are 3 heralds. Either way, it's neither a single person or a single object. Instead, it's different strands of an existential threat that only make sense when our separate heroes become a team. Again, this works really well because it promotes tribal unity. Everyone has their moment to shine, and together they're stronger than they are apart. This is another way of tackling a herald when you don't want to be so overt as to deliver a call to action letter. The Herald is our drive to propel the hero onto the New Age. What that path looks like, and what the New Age could be, spans from hero journeys to horror, and can be as bright or as dark as you want it. Understand the great symbolism that comes with the Herald, to give it its due respect and put it in its proper place, even if it's an intangible ideal, or a letter in the mail. Once again, thanks so much to every single person that saw last week's video and were kind enough to leave an anonymous donation. If you haven't heard already, this is Liana. This beautiful little lady is my little girl, and one of the most important people in my life. Liana is on the spectrum, which has its own fair share of hero trials for her to overcome, and right now she is participating with an absolutely wonderful organization called Needs up in Boston, and they're fundraising to get her a service dog. How cool is that, right? So, if you'd like to contribute, I have a link to the fundraising page in the description box down below. While you're down there, don't forget to sign up for my newsletter, and the links are in the comments too. You're going to get Cora Blake, Arcane Agent, totally free. You'll get cool news about what I'm working on the books and here on the channel, and it comes loaded with cool authors and promotions for fantasy and sci-fi. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear about new videos, and as always, I'm DC Ferguson. Now have fun and get crafting.